hide behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. It is Wednesday morning, and winter has reared its ugly head in Canada. Yes, it's snowy, it's cold, makes us who we are, you know. What you gonna do? At this point, I would like to introduce my lovely and talented co-host, who I must say is a lot less red than she normally is today. Good morning, Kerri Barber. How are you this morning?
Good morning. We are testing out our new setup. I gotta say, it's distracting. It's incredibly awkward. So the production value is raised a fraction, but we'll see how this works because on our show, it's content. Content is king. And the goal is to teach you something, not just look, you know. Yeah. So
Yeah, just ignore all our problems.
Right, exactly. So I was wanting to do a show today about the brunch crowd because they just don't stop. They don't stop. So we're still seeing now is not the time. Now is not the time to push Biden left. So when is the time to push Biden left, right? We weren't allowed to be, our agency, let me speak leftist, our agency was disrupted by neoliberals during the general election when we were complaining that the Biden camp was not paying attention to anything that we asked for that, you know, might save money and save lives, and instead catering to the Wall Street crowd. And that was not the time. So now that Biden has been elected and, you know, he's doing his thing, putting his transition team together, now it is still not the time. And when we're seeing these disastrous nominees roll out, oh boy, it's still not the time. So when is the time? And if we cater to allowing them to silence goddamn adults, we're adults. We have a legal right. It says so in the Constitution to say something, stand up, speak out. Who's going to represent us and, you know, maybe move us forward instead of back. So I wanted to do the brunch crowd. These are the neoliberals. These are the ones who are really Republicans in blue jumpsuits. They're ultra conservative. They don't understand how money works, or if they do, they're outright lying.
Or they don't care.
They don't care. And that's part of what it is, because so long as I have mine, I want everything to stay the same. And it's so funny because there's that phrase about the leopard. I didn't expect the leopard to eat my face off. I thought they were going to eat everyone else's face off. And it's funny to watch it happening in Georgia to Republicans.
The leopard?
Yes, that is a phrase. It's a phrase. So the Republican who I don't recall his name off the top of my head, but he was a Republican chair in a county where they were getting death threats from some of the QAnon people because they were certifying the vote and doing their job. And he was getting tired of it. He's like, look, you need to stop. You need to stand up and say something, speak out against all of this vitriol and the threats. Wait, you were okay when it was happening to other people, but now that it's happening to you and they've come after you, it's a problem. So we're all laughing at this Republican in Georgia, and yet the groundwork is being laid by these neoliberals who want the status quo, who want to be comfortable and fuck everybody else, right? You know, especially the people who are like, well, let's roll out Medicaid as our national health care plan. Bullshit. bullshit when you do a deeper dive into what Medicaid actually covers. And oh, by the way, there are providers who don't accept that insurance everywhere. That's kind of a problem. And so those people are the ones who are saying we need to, especially, okay, I'm a little disjointed here because I'm still tired, but Rahm Emanuel. When people from Chicago go, oh, fuck no on Rahm, you should listen, right? We had Rahm as our mayor of a major city, the largest inland port in the entire nation. And we said, no, fuck that guy. You don't want him, with terror and trepidation. And you said it was not time for us to have that conversation. Who knows better than the people of Chicago what a shit show Rahm is? And here is what happened. Because we spoke up, Rahm is no longer at the top of the list. He's been moved kind of towards the back. He's still in there. He's still clawing his way to a big fat paycheck, but he's not front and center anymore. And so this is what I wanted to talk about. So we're doing brunch today, and we're going to invite all of our brunchies, our Becky's with the latte, to weigh in and tell us where we're wrong. Before we get started, I want to put up, Andy, there was the tweet from this gentleman. I cut off his name to be respectful, but I think he clearly demonstrates what exactly we're dealing with here. And this was on the tweet thread on Twitter, the tweet thread for Joe Biden, where Joe Biden was, he had some, bland generic message. And this guy jumped out because apparently Joe Biden needs defending still, really? So this guy took it upon himself to admonish other adults about what they can and cannot say to the president-elect. And I thought it was interesting. I'm like, first, who the fuck are you? To start being the police. You remember when we were at school, and I don't know if you had this in Canada, Andy, we had hall monitors, particularly in elementary and in junior high classes, where you had a student who was set to police other students, check hall passes. You couldn't leave your classroom without a hall pass. So what they did was they elevated some arbitrary student, to the level of a Pinkerton, and they took that job so seriously that if you left and you forgot your hall pass or whatever else,
yes,
they were going to come down.
These were the future CEOs of large corporations.
That's exactly right. So this particular gentleman, I was cracking up, and he was so serious about it. At one point, he took his entire account and hid it, so you couldn't reply to him because he was getting ratioed like crazy. First off, you're not my parent, and this is my right as a voter. To push back, and if not now, when? Right. So as an incoming administration is putting together their roster, now we voiced this concern here in our network in the transition team when we found out who was on the transition team, particular Rham Emanuel, and then all the Wall Street flunkies. We were like, oh, this is a problem, because what happens, for most people who don't know it, the transition team becomes cabinet in the next step. So when they're putting things together and they're determining who's going to be in their staff, their seconds, all of these sort of things, that happens on the transition team. That's the very nature of a transition team. And so when they start to roll these names out, we have to push back. We have to say, okay, this isn't right. So this is why I thought the conversation today would be particularly helpful. So
I saw a very funny meme yesterday, actually, that said that the centrists are blaming progressive for Joe Biden's broken foot for trying to push him left.
See, I missed it completely because I was I try to hold my nose and go into the QAnon and the right-wing conspiracy. So I was in that dismissed completely that he was wearing a boot. It wasn't until this morning when QAnon was saying he's wearing a boot to hide the ankle monitor that I heard he was having it. But it's good to know that he got it. Like you said, Andy, we're pushing him too hard. Too hard.
Well, and I'd just like to clarify that Kerri just said a boot in meaning footwear, not like the Canadian way of saying about.
That's right. Well, I still, from time to time, I still have my Uber accent, and it kind of slips out. So I do an about every once in a while. So that's where that comes from. So,
Lord Thunder and Jesus.
Yeah, that's totally Uber right there. So yeah, it's pasty season anyway. So good segue. But yeah, so let's put up the next graphic, because I think let's get the greater conversation going. And for those who are just tuning in, we are actually live, hence the technical issues. So when you weigh in with your comments, particularly on Facebook, we'll see those. And we want to participate with you in this conversation. Where are we wrong? Where are we not wrong? How is all of this going to go down? So aside from Rham Emanuel, we had the lovely and talented Miss Neera Tanden, who apparently has a wonderful right hook. She has, let's just call it what it is, assaulted people, physically assaulted people. And one of those people was the former campaign staffer for Bernie Sanders. He apparently had the audacity to ask Hillary Clinton an uncomfortable question. It wasn't a vapid question. It wasn't a question about her hairstyle or clothing or whatever. It was a policy question when it came to monetary policy. And at the end of this interview, where Hillary was quite put out by being asked a tough question, she left, and Neera Tanden allegedly, but she admits it, went over and hit this guy in the gut. I mean, full on. How dare he ask a question?
She did say that I didn't punch him. I pushed him. Okay. And I'm looking at that saying, okay, that's still assault. You know, it's like saying, I didn't kill him. I just mortally wounded him.
That's exactly right. So none of that really has come out in this pushback on Neera Tanden. And honestly, Andy, we have often harped on the dual justice system. We've had plenty of great guests on to talk about the dual justice system. Here yet again is another one. Do you think if Neera Tanden and I were in a room and she said something I didn't like and I hit her, or in her words, pushed her really hard with my fist, do you think that I wouldn't be up on charges?
Well, I think that the brunch crew would probably send a hit squad at you, you know, consisting of like Alyssa Milano and that whole crew. So you might be in trouble, but it might be good that, you know, you went out and purchased that huge array of shotguns that you have.
I don't have a huge array.
You do compared to me.
Well, that's true. One is a huge array in comparison. So yeah, and this is where we get to ignore the bad behavior that these people exhibit in favor of their celebrity, and Neera is one of them. So I posted on my own Facebook page why this happens, and it's pretty simple. I think we give these people way too much credit for being brilliant. And some of them actually are experts in their field, but the conspiracy and how they get there is pretty simple. So I went back to when the DCCC several years ago came to Chicago in a series of meetings. This was during the super delegate reform. And you had a number of progressives within the caucus and within the DNC, as well as outside, there to push for it. And ironically, we also had there was a big protest and there was a conference there for the health administrators. So if you went to it physically, you had to talk to some of those health administrators about programs like Medicare for All. And I was delighted to find that a number of them supported it, but were apprehensive because nobody wanted to be the first one on the dance floor. So it was a good opportunity to talk to them, to talk to DNC members, all of these sort of things. So if a DNC meeting is coming to your town, make time, go. You can go and sit in the back and observe what's going on. So here's what I observed throughout several days of this DNC was the entire pushback, at least what they said publicly. The pushback on the superdelegate reform is, but we want to be special. We deserve to be special because, and there was this one woman I wrote about, I didn't put her name on there, but she was from Louisiana. She said, I have canvassed and I have stuffed envelopes and I have made phone calls for years. I am owed special treatment. And in the back of my head, I was like, wait a second. I just walked 35 miles, neighborhoods. I'm a volunteer PC for one district, but I picked up 8 others as a volunteer. And I've been doing this for other candidates, and we've been recruiting candidates and election judges and all of these positions. Why is she special? And in her mind, she was owed the superdelegate, all the privileges and rights to decide because I was not special, even though we're all supposed to be volunteers and equal within the Democratic Party at that time. So I thought that was interesting. And then you had Donna Brazile herself saying the same thing. And at the time she had just, she had been the interim chair during the Hillary debacle and all of that. And she was making the same statement. And I approached her specifically to ask about it, and I'm being friendly. And she made the same case that super delegates are super party members and they've been around for a while and they've volunteered and do time and effort. And I'm like, but we're all volunteers. All of us, from the person who just joined and is stuffing envelopes to the person who's been here for 10 years, right? And so I know that some of the Democratic members like to go wax biblical, but there's that phrase about laborers in the garden. Whether you got there today, whether you got there at noon, whether you got there at the end of the day, y'all get paid the same, right? Because you're laboring for the same thing. And they didn't see it that way. So this is how you get a Rham Emanuel and a Neera Tanden. Because here's the seedy side of it, the backup. If you have been around long enough and you have maybe a party member or a party leader who is a little bit sketchy and we're going to win by any means necessary, we're going to do things that maybe are a little questionable and we want you to do it. Or, hey, there's this progressive group over here that is a little outspoken and we need to rein them in a little bit. So we want you to go and join that group and calm them down, maybe derail them, or if you will, but take over this group and just lead them in circles so they're really not doing anything. There's an appointment for a job coming up. And all of these examples that I just gave, I have seen firsthand, all of them. And it's not just in Illinois where it's super corrupt. It's not just in Georgia where it's super corrupt. We're talking about county level. We're talking about front line. And that is how easy it is to start crossing the line into that gray area. So if you go to that route and you decide to look the other way, it can be as simple as looking the other way when someone else is doing something sketchy. Now you're owned. And you do that enough and you keep your mouth shut. Oh, I can trust you. Okay, so your name is going to go on a list and you start rising up within the party because you are complicit. And we saw this with Rham Emanuel in the Obama administration, and we saw it with Neera Tanden with Hillary and the Obama administration and all of these things. So this is how these people can do this shady bullshit and still get consideration for a cabinet position because they are owed. And in their mind, that's exactly how it goes. And the people who are a little less than scrupulous, yeah, that's how it goes. Because if I've got enough dirt on you, you're going to keep your mouth shut and do what I tell you to do. You're loyal for the good of the party.
And I would also say that I think there's also an air of privilege in that as well. And I don't use that term loosely. When I say that, even to get into the position of where these people are in the DNC, talks to how they, started in life, were able to advance to a position in society monetarily. These are people that were able to afford an education, that were able to work in an environment where they had the time to do volunteer work. So anybody in society that doesn't have the ability to afford that education, that has to work 2, 3, 4 jobs, right? Where do you find the time to run for public office? Where do you find the time to do volunteer work, right? It's unfortunate, but these people have basically been priced out of the market, because on top of everything else, if you want to run politically or have a political say in anything, you also have to have the ability to raise, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? That's unattainable for most Americans, right? So it's a certain class of people that are always in those positions, that always have the ability to make those decisions and fill those positions, right?
Oh, absolutely. And just real quick, good morning to Dave Gutowski. Saw your comment. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're trying with the background. Thank you. And he is basically corroborating what I was saying. So thank you, Dave. I know I'm not nuts. So, but yeah, Andy, you're absolutely right. It's amazing to me how my earphones keep slipping out. I have tiny ears, apparently. That is the only thing small about me. But yeah, so this is how, and then we look around and wonder why we have such a corrupt government, right? So when that moment comes in, and I'm going to go back to Shakespeare, everybody had to read this, at least in the US, and all the world's a stage, right? So it talks about those tiny little moments that you are being tested. And it's that moment where your county chair says something that is a little untoward, or we're going to dox this person who's being a little too vocal. That is your test. And if in that moment where it seems like something small, oh, I don't want to get involved, I don't want to say anything, you add another brick to the shit show by being complicit. So yeah, so this is why we're seeing all of this. And then Andy, to your point about the economics of it, right? If you're not in that club, if you're not the one rubbing elbows and you don't have the right credentials, then your ideas are never going to bubble up to that group. You're never going to be a loyalist to that group. Yet when we have experiments in technology with crowdsourcing, this is how we got the human genome categorized. This is how we got the first major breakthroughs on combating the HIV virus. Crowdsourcing, no-name people, which is why the grassroots is so powerful in this. And getting back to our topic, that grassroots swell, pushing back on Rahm Emanuel, worked. And I'm hoping that the grassroots swell, pushing back on Neera Tanden, puts her right back under the rock where she belongs. And this is one of those people where I cannot be objective about Neera Tanden because I have personal experience with her. She's a vile individual. She may be brilliant and she may be doing some great things. We're hearing rumors and pushback from people who worked for her that say, no, not the same thing. But when she rolled out the CAP plan as an alternative, it was pitched as an alternative to Medicare for all. And she was going out and doing a tour about how wonderful it was. I had the opportunity to directly challenge her on that in a nice way and make her explain that this was a rollout of Medicaid and what those limitations are, limitations that quarterly are featured on the CMS reporting. So she outright lied about what her plan was. And then when she was challenged on it, she got pissed because there are enough of us out there who read the ACA. There are enough of us out there who understand what Medicare for all is. There are enough of us out there who read her CAP plan and could parse it together in comparison to know that she was lying, and she did not appreciate being called out on it. And this was one of those things where I'm like, it's beyond pride at this point. If you're out here pitching a medical policy that still forwards insurance companies for profit, that we are subsidizing insurance companies at the risk and detriment to lives, that is beyond wrong. To me, that is the very definition of evil. You are okay with people dying so that this company can profit and you can get a bigger paycheck. So this is the kind of person that we're talking about. She was outright lying. Like it's easy to pull where a Trump supporter is lying or a Trump acolyte is lying. Here you had Neera Tanden doing it on a national circuit, and everybody was okay with it. So I do not want her in any critical role. I don't even want her in the background somewhere writing a memo. I want her to retire happily. Thank you for your service. We appreciate everything you've done. Enjoy the rest of your life. Bye. That is the level I'm at with her.
And I'm almost thinking that that's even kind of generous.
I'm trying to be nice.
Yeah, well, it's not flying real well, especially with me. You know, this is the woman that's said that we should, steal Libya's oil as a payment for the U.S. bombing them, right? Like, well, that's how regime change wars, usually get started, and that's the reason why. So she's fitting right in. But I would say that any of the people that Biden has floated for a position in his administration, nobody has gotten even close to the reaction that Neera Tantrum has.
Yeah, she's a piece of work. And the fact that her name was ever floated to me is alarming, right? So so we have on the one hand, she was owed, right? She's done probably some pretty shady shit, allegedly. So she's a loyalist. But what was the thought process where somebody went, yeah, this is a great idea, let's do it? No. Oh my God, no, not her. And if she didn't understand, based on her last 6 years of Twitter, how reviled she was, then she needs to get out of that bubble a little bit more. And I'm also going to, and I know this is where I'm going to get pushed back, Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams is in that same organization, that same bubble. So I'm not going to lie. I had schadenfreude when Stacey Abrams was on live TV with Joe Biden expecting to get the nod for VP, and she didn't. And her face just, to me, that was karma, because she also did the same things to get into that position, and she was owed. She was owed. And we saw the photos of her as a superhero with the cape on her pantsuit, and she thought she was doing everything that they asked her to do. Meanwhile, she was out there as, the dancing puppet, doing what they wanted her to do for a purpose that had nothing to do with her personal gain. She thought she was going to be repaid like Libya and their oil after the fact. And this is their thought process, which is why, Neera Tanden coming out with her tweet saying that I came up through social safety nets and I relied on it and I'm going to protect it, when you have a history of actually advocating for cuts. Under the Biden administration, you had the Obama-Biden administration, let me correct that, you had statements and went out and sold the idea that all options were on the table, including Social Security and Medicare and all of these programs. And now you want to claim it. That's a Paul Ryan move. That's bullshit. And Paul Ryan tried it, and it was so bad that you had a group of poor nuns scraping together pennies to get their bus to follow him around the country to talk about how evil that financial policy was. Where are the nuns for Neera Tanden? Where are the nuns for Joe Biden? right? Why is this okay if you happen to be wearing a blue jumpsuit to advocate for these kind of cuts to necessary programs? And this is why I think Neera Tanden, they don't get it. They don't get where we are. They don't see the lines to the food banks, like Texas. Oh my God, that was 4 or 5 miles long. We have COVID ravaging the country, and these cannot be sound bites that you used for an election and then discard when it's your time to step up and do something. So Biden's team sent out a tweet, help is coming, and they wrote it into his speech, don't worry, help is coming. People can't wait. We can't wait. And everyone keeps saying, in the first 4 years of Joe Biden's administration, no, he's got 4 weeks. 4 weeks. That's all he has from the time that he gets inaugurated and we set policy. It's got to be day one, because we'll have already lost so many people, so many businesses up until that point.
Exactly. And that's the biggest thing that just kind of blows my mind, right? You look at the reason why America where it is, right? The reasons that America got Trump, right? And how Trump bad, orange man bad. We've said that's been the only policy position for the entire election campaign on the Democrats side, right? That's a huge thing. You think about what COVID-19 has done to this country and how the ability for information to be disseminated instantly because of social media and independent media and all of, these new things that are out there, right? And the deaths that are happening and people getting sick and not getting any support by the government. And now you've got a White House that potentially is putting together a team of specialists who's specializing in austerity and warmongering, and you just look at that whole thing and say, there 2 questions come up. First, are you kidding me? And second, are you fucking kidding me? Right? Like this is the absolute horrible consequences that could arise from this, right? Like, are we talking about the fall of the great empire, right? Like that the government, the corrupt politicians can't, go against their donors. And so anybody in that White House, right, in the status quo that we now have back, continue to do the exact same things. Does that mean that this is potentially the worst winter the U.S. has ever faced? Right? That's a really scary concept that has the potential for people to die in mass numbers. That's a scary thing to me. And I look at that and say, how can Americans not see that? How can they not be frightened as hell that this is coming? Right? It just blows me away.
Well, to your point, yes, this is the reality that we face, but we have had on our program regular average people who are not going to be part of that special club, who are pushing back, like the folks in Illinois and Pennsylvania who are working on utility shutoff moratoriums, right? They are pushing back on their own government at the highest levels, and it's just regular folks. So it can be done. And I think once we realize as progressives our power to keep talking and to keep getting this message out there, and to just, stiff arm these brunch crowd folks who say, not yet, not now, let him get into office, give him a chance. No, we heard that under Trump. Fuck you. Get out of the way. People are dying. Right? I am fighting for someone I don't even know because it's the right thing to do, and you are standing in my way. So get out of the way. But once we recognize our power in that, you're going to see some massive sweeping changes. This is why we've been saying from the beginning, Rome said it, we've said it all across our network, all across the progressive spectrum. Do not put away your marching shoes. We have work to do, right? So, and Andy,
Yes,
you brought up.
I
Go ahead.
agree. I think that's a very valid point. And I remember what Glenn Ford of the Black Agenda report said during our podcast, is that the entire civil rights movement that happened in the 60s, why was it successful? It's because those people that were protesting and marching, that came across that bridge, they had nothing left to lose, right? This was all they had left. And so it wasn't a hard decision to put it all on the line, because, that was just the situation. Is America going to get to that point over this winter if there are no longer stimulus packages coming because the austerity model says we can't afford it? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as we're looking at the headlines and the few details that are coming out about the new package, you're worth about $300 a week, apparently, to Congress. And that's only if you're unemployed. If you have the worst case scenario where you're unemployed, it's $300 a week extra. And that's it. That is an egregious number compared to the rest of the world that has taken care of their people, because they recognize it is the work of the people that creates the wealth and the GDP. And part of it is these metrics that we're using for the stock market to show the economy are just so bogus, so disconnected from reality. And this is the same bubble and crowd that the Neera Tandens and the Rahm Emanuels and the Joe Bidens look at. They're not looking at the real measures of the economy. And God forbid the number, we keep looking at the number of deaths in COVID. Let's look at the number of people who recovered and who had hospitalization. Each one of them is looking at thousands in medical bills through no fault of their own, right? So in this climate, like you said, Andy, we are about to have the worst, most dire winter. And I also want to get back to it would have been a beautiful segue had I jumped on it, but you were talking about technology and all of these other things. So the last slide we want to put up here, this was brought to my attention by a gentleman who was upset that Obama said he's going to, he believes in censorship of the internet. So I went out and found the Vanity Fair interview with Obama. And that's not quite what he said. So it is one of those examples where we are getting ourselves worked up unnecessarily over things that aren't necessarily, they don't matter, right? It's a distraction from the things that do matter. So on this particular graphic, I have Obama circa 2013 in China criticizing them for their censorship. And it was true, because in China, a lot of things are locked down. And particularly if you're a corporation, a multinational corporation, and you're trying to do an investor call, or you're trying to do something where your leadership in one country is talking to your people in Taiwan or whatever, you cannot get internet to those people. You've got to do your own situation set up there. So he, under that context, was in China criticizing them about putting a lock on what is accessible by their people, because for other people, it's encouraging democracy and discussion when you have an open internet. But the pushback now is, well, you have alt-right and neo-Nazis and fascists organizing under the internet. Yeah, you know how you counter that? With good policy. Right? So why do people join gangs? Well, there's insecurity. There's insecurity of person, security, financial, all of these things that push them to join a gang. Becoming a neo-Nazi, a fascist, a white supremacist starts from that same framework. So rather than addressing the root cause, let's paper over it and not allow them to speak and make sure they go to parlay and all of these sorts of things. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy, because I'm the one who has to live in the neighborhood with these folks, not you. You're in Georgetown. I'm right here. right? So these are my neighbors. I don't want them to go away. I want to hear what they have to say. I don't agree with it, but how else do I educate them about what federal spending looks like? Right. So online, you'll see a lot of people talking about, well, it's the blue states, that's where businesses are failing. No, it's every state, blue state, red state. And here's how federal spending works. The states cannot create their own currency. It has to come from the Fed or taxes. That's it. So if we can't afford to get the PPE, if we can't afford more hospital beds, if we can't afford to take care of our doctors and nurses, guess what? We got to go to the Fed. And who's holding the strings? Pelosi and McConnell. Those are the people you should talk to, right? So we cannot have those conversations if we're tramping down on free speech, which is a constitutional right. If we're limiting what other people can say, and I don't know about you, but during Obama's term, you had the right just furious, and they came out with these bumper stickers that said Obama, big mistake, and they misspelled mistake. I loved those bumper stickers because to me, it was a PSA, right? I could avoid that car and that driver. Okay, you don't have a whole lot of common sense. Maybe I'm going to give you some extra space on the road.
The only time it's funnier is when somebody does it in a tattoo.
Yeah, and that's real hard to get rid of.
That's right.
So,
you can't just use whiteout.
Well, it depends. All right, maybe it'll work. So yeah, so and it goes back to the conversations that Brandon has had with some of his DLF Live segments, some other shows that we've got coming up. We've got to talk to each other because Mitch McConnell is not going to swoop in and save you. Nancy Pelosi is not going to swoop in and save you. And already we're seeing Joe Biden and his cabinet. They are not going to swoop in and save us. It's just us, right? There's nobody who's going to pay that medical bill but you. So this is where the power of the progressive movement, policies that make sense, when you sit down and explain progressive policy in an objective, fact-based way to anybody. I don't care if it's the deepest QAnon person. If you explain it to them, they will come around and come on board. Because we are not paid shills for the insurance company. We are not trying to take extra money from them. We're actually trying to give them money and benefits because it's the power of we. So I think that is where we need to focus and keep pushing back on Joe Biden's transition team, because I'm one of those people that was really concerned about elder abuse during the campaign. I don't know that President-elect Biden is all there, and I'm really concerned about our democracy from that standpoint. Everyone keeps pushing on, well, Trump ruined it. We're not out of the woods yet, right? So I feel like, this is my own conspiracy theory, that Trump was a useful idiot, and the oligarchs really like the idea of having a useful puppet. So I am looking for Joe Biden to step down and Kamala Harris to be elevated. But I don't think he's out of the woods yet. And it wasn't a stutter. It definitely was not a stutter. So I don't know. Have I gone too far, Andy?
No, not at all. I wanted to talk briefly about this really interesting dynamic that I see that has the potential to happen in a almost ironic way. And it was highlighted when I saw yesterday with Glenn Greenwald, right? And Glenn's been the butt of many Twitter and Facebook attacks over the last little while because of what's happened with him in his position, right? And he went on Fox News talking to Uncle Tucker, and they were both going off on Neera Tanden, right? And so if you're asking yourself why that's significant, I think that progressives now have a lot more in common with the GOP than they do with the Democrats, quite honestly, right? So if you are if looking for something in America that can meld two different pots of society together, the hatred of the Democrats might be it, right? With two very strange bedfellows. And it's potentially something that could happen, right? If it's the fact that none of us trust the Democrats and most of mainstream media because of their thing, it could become a very interesting merger between right-wing quote unquote media and progressives that are both, because they do have a very common interest, right? Because when it comes right down to it, Americans just want to survive this, right? So I think that it will be a very interesting thing to watch.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with you because as you were talking, I was like going through these flashbacks of being a member of my Democratic Party and questioning the financials. Hey, what's going on here? And automatically being labeled a Republican plant, right? If you push back at all, then these Democrat elitists label you a Republican and you're shunned. Well, yeah, I'm going to get invited to a QAnon party before they will because I'm not insane, right? So I think that what I'm looking for, and I'm starting to see a little bit of it, and you alluded to it, Andy, is that the red team, blue team is going to go away. And what will be revealed based on Trump's policies and Neera Tanden and all of this. And let's be honest, some of these people who are being bubbled up were also considered in the Trump campaign, right? So you have the new person, I forget what her name is off the top of my head, but she's going to take over for the Pentagon, so the DOD. She was a consideration under Trump too. So you see this veil of separation between the parties is almost completely gone now. So some of our brunch crowd is still holding on to Team Blue, yay Team Blue, but what is actually happening is it's a class division, and I don't mean etiquette. I mean those who work for a living, who have to work for a living, who used to work for a living, or who are disabled and cannot work for a living. That is the class that we are all in. And then you have the oligarchs above us, our betters, who are making the decisions because we don't know any better. We're just slobbering masses. Well, that's complete and utter bullshit. And this is where freedom of speech and information and all of this access is coming out. And I think part of the scariest thing for the oligarchs is this new generation, the baby progressives who, even if they consign themselves to a conservative view or whatever, they get access to information unlike any generation before. So you really have to try very hard with your propaganda machine. You've got Vox and MSNBC and all of these trying to stay cohesive and together, and all the party apparatus trying to stay cohesive and together and marginalize dissenting views. Hence the brunch crowd. So I think this is part of the encouragement that I'm seeing, that the expectation that Trump is going to ruin the Republican Party, I think, was overblown. They were well on their way already. Trump himself has been a Democrat for decades, and they all run in the same circles. So if it is not evident to people now that it is a class structural organization and not red team, blue team, especially like Joseph Torino, when he was describing what was going on in Georgia, that to me was very clearly a class warfare issue, not red team, blue team. And we're seeing it now with the runoff elections. So yeah, so that was all I got. I wanted to correct the record on what Obama actually said, but he himself in that quote talks about decades of neoliberal policy that gave us Trump. So Obama saying the same thing we're saying is, what's going on there? I don't know. Change of heart, maybe.
Well, who knows? Like, I mean, there's a lot of people on the progressive left that believe that Obama was the mastermind that, you know, set up the as I call it, the South Carolina massacre of Bernie, right, with Claiborne and getting everybody to drop out before that primary, right? Mm-hmm. And now that he's got what he wanted, he's looking to ingratiate himself with the progressive left because, you know, everything's set up for the next 4 years. So now I can just make myself look good. Perhaps.
I caution about giving them that much credit. I don't think they thought that far ahead, right? They're not more brilliant than the average person. Mensa is not knocking down their door either. I think that was a moment of honesty, but the Claiborne thing, I look at that as one of those favors owed, right? So somebody lit a fire under Obama and said, okay, you need to stop this and we need X, Y, and Z. So yeah, it's your time to do something. This is part of why you do it. It's just like making Bernie sign the agreement that he will remain a Democrat for the rest of his political career. This is, you're owed this. The expectation is you'll do it. So I don't know. That, and I would like to think that the entire interview in The Atlantic was about his memoirs and what an interesting tale he was weaving here. So I wonder if having that moment of introspection about what would happen, like we saw Clinton talking about the Sudan was his biggest disaster, the thing he regrets most amongst all the things. You wonder if during those memoir exercises, maybe a little bit of guilt creeps in. I don't know. So that's just my thought on it. But that's all I got for the brunch session. I do want to make sure that if you're tuning in today and you're watching this maybe after the fact, our tens of viewers, Friday is going to be a fun show. So we have a professional comedian very early in his career. And I've seen some of his stand-up work and things like that. And so if you're a feminist, tune in. You're going to love this one. So this is Darnell Williams. He's from Florida. I think he's funny and he has so much potential. And we want to bring him on to talk about during this time of chaos and crazy, how do we keep laughing and how do we keep moving forward with sense of humor? And, I was joking with him earlier that, well, since you've moved to Florida, you should have tons of great new content now. So, imagine, right? I've always said that Florida is a place where democracy went to die. Right? Oh, good Lord. Yeah, it truly had. And, there's so much wrong with Florida. It's just.
And it has such potential.
It does. But I mean, okay, so I went to UCF. I lived in Florida for a number of years. I do everything possible not to have to go back to Florida. Just because little things, like I have one of those batshit crazy aunts. She calls herself Catholic. She's really evangelical, who will vote against her own her interests on like environmental stuff. So there were like toxins pouring into Tampa Bay and into all of the little waterways around her house. And I'm like, you are literally voting to poison your grandchildren. And I had to show her the maps of where the chemical was going. I'm like, that's your canal, isn't it? Well, yes, but I'm like, oh my God, just do me a favor. Don't have your grandkids over. How about that? You just wallow in that. So this just kind of gives you a glimmer of a long list of reasons why I don't go to Florida. So.
Yeah, well, I would like to go again some point in my life.
Go visit Disney.
I go for the baseball, but you know that. And I didn't want to mention that because I know it's a trigger for you.
A little bit. A little bit is the most boring game ever to watch. But yeah, it's boys of summer. There you go.
It takes 9 innings to thaw out if you're Canadian.
I believe it. I believe it. So yeah, that's all I got. Andy, any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Just one. Just one. This one's directed to the anti-vaxxers. If you are refusing a vaccine because you don't know what's in it, you are automatically disqualified if you've ever eaten a hot dog or a bologna sandwich.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. So I don't know, Andy. Okay, so I am not an anti-vaxxer. I almost died one year because of whooping cough, which was almost eradicated thanks to this little anti-vaxxer group in California. It spread to my son's football team, and I got it and almost died that year. So now every year I have to get a whooping cough vaccine. So I am not an anti-vaxxer, but I'm looking at the process where this got rushed through, and boy, I'm really hoping that all of these trials, that it's not a situation like we've seen in other industries where they rush through and ignore the data. So I'm so hopeful, because the first wave of people that will get it in our country are doctors and nurses, and I want them to be protected. So please, virologists, please, everybody working on this, do your best, do it right. I'm nervous.
Well, listen, you know what? I think a lot of it has to be taken with a grain of salt too, right? Because the people that are involved with this, right, are healthcare professionals. They're medical professionals. And when they become medical professionals, their Hippocratic oath is do no harm. That never changes, right? Forget about the fact that it can be used as a political football by some, right? There are a lot of the reasons why people are afraid of this virus or this vaccine, can be easily debunked if you listen to the medical professionals that know what they're talking about. I just edited a video for a gentleman that has medical history, that knows somewhat about what he's talking about, and RNA resequencing and the spike protein and the compounds and all this stuff. And he does make a very convincing argument, but it's based in science. It's not based in fear, and it's not based in politics. So I don't think that people can have to worry as much as they do that the zombie apocalypse is coming anytime soon.
Perfect. Then as soon as that is up and running, let's share that. And so that I can watch it and maybe feel a little bit better. I think part of it is the PTSD that we've all suffered through over the last 4 years. Like, oh God, this started under that administration. How bad is it going to be? Who sold out? Who took a paycheck? But you're right. If we start to listen to the people who are actually doing, like, Dr. Burdett was working on it. I trust Dr. Burdett. So let's forward more of those stories so that we can all be a little more comfortable, work together, and make sure that our frontline workers are taken care of, because we're already seeing now, like I mentioned before last week, my new neighbors in the Airbnb are doctors and nurses from out of state because we have a shortage here. So, yes. And it's happening all over the country. So
absolutely. Yeah. That's a big deal, right? Like, I mean, people that are involved in this are the doctors and the healthcare professionals and the virologists, the right people that are involved in it. Like, I mean, ultimately, if you understand why capitalism is, the real disability that the U.S. suffers from, right, and know why things are happening the way they do, they want this virus to go away, right? They want it to disappear so they can go back to business as usual of making, trillions of dollars for rich people, right? And I think that it's currently in everybody's best interest that, this vaccine works and that all the precautions are taken, right? So.
Absolutely. And yeah, I've got nothing more to add that's better than what you just said. So thank you, Andy. And with that, we'll see everybody on Friday.
Absolutely.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keep it in G.